Hi guys, it's Kobe here, and in today's video we are going to talk about the Mograph Effectors in C4D's Mograph menu. So I have a cloner object here which I've cloned some platonic sphere and cube in here, and I have a full tutorial on how to use the cloner object in here. So I'll come to my Mograph menu, and you can see we have the Effector tab here, so I can actually click on this one to tear the tab on its own. So I'll start. We have all these effectors in here which I'll go ahead and explain everything, but I'll start with the planar object, plane effector So I'll select the cloner object, and with the clone selected, if I should click on the planar plane, you can see it moves our clone upwards. So for now I can close this one because we are going to talk about the plane for now. So with this plane selected, let's actually come down here to see what's going on. So the first tab we'll actually start talking about is the Effector tab. And the basic stuff around here is basically this is where you control the strength of your effector. So you can even go more than the 100% set here, and you can go below as well, more than less than that, right? The next is the selection, which is basically you can make selections. So when you have the Mograph clone selected, you can come to the Mograph menu, you can choose any of these selections, which is the Mograph selection, right? And now with our clone selected, we can actually start selecting some clones. You can see there are some dots within the all the objects in there. So with the ones that turn orange are the ones selected. So now if I come to my plane effector, you can actually use this, drag it and drop it in here, and that's the only thing the plane effector is going to select. So if I should increase the strength, you can see now it's affecting only the ones I've selected. So that's basically what the selection is for as well. You can simply select it and delete it, or can right click and say reset to default, and it's the same thing. And after that, you can also delete the tag which appears from the cloner as well, right? Then let's go back to the plane, and the next thing is the minimum and maximum, which is basically control the minimum and maximum strength of the effector. So you can actually increase the maximum strength of it and also reverse it as well, come down to minus. And with the minimum, in some cases, in this particular instance, you might not see the effect, but something like in the random, you actually will get to see how it works properly, right? So basically this is about the effectors tab. Now let's go to the parameters. So with the parameter tab, you can see we have the transform side, which has a lot going on here. So you can see when you apply the plane effector to the clone, it moved up a bit, and that's because in the parameter tab it's moving the clone on the Y 100 centimeters, right? So if we change it, you can see now it's moving, and you can reduce it as well, go other side. And you can also do the same thing with rotation, and as well as scaling and everything in here. So that's where you control how you want to move your clones as well, right? And you can see within the parameter, the transform side of the parameters, we have other tabs here, which is absolute, remap, and everything. And with that, I can properly show you using a field. So I'll go ahead and create a linear field here, and you can see now what's the linear field. We will go ahead and talk about the field tab as well, but it's sort of giving us a fall of which where the strength is giving us like sort of a gradient. So where it affects it, it will go high, and where it doesn't affect it, you can see it stays at its basic default shape of the cloner, right? So I'll go back with the plane selected, and I come to the parameters, and see we have these tabs here, and for now everything is fine. So if I should select the linear field, right, and I'll make sure my move tool is selected and move it, everything moves fine. And if you come to the plane, you can see the transform mode is set to relative, right, and the transform space is set to node. So the node is basically every clone here, every individual clone is what is the node, right? And the transform mode is set to relative. So this 100 centimeters is relative to the space or the position of every particular clone on itself. So basically that's why you see when I'm moving it, even though the X is set to 0, Y is set to 0, every clone continues to be at its position and now moves upwards. That's it's moving relative to its own position. But immediately we change it to absolute, nothing happens, because the space is still set to the node, which is the same every clone on its own. But if we change it to like the effector, you can see now it has changed, and that's because now it's regarding the position of the effector based on these parameters. So if I set it to 0, is set to 0 centimeters on X, 0 centimeters on Z, and Y 154 centimeters on Y. So that's what every clone or every individual object will move to that particular position set here, right? So if I should move the Z, every individual clone or every object will move to that particular space I've set here. So that's what the absolute in there. If I set it to the object space, the same thing will happen, but you wouldn't see because the object is also in the same space as the effector. So for instance, if I select the clone and I move it to say I move it here, you can see now it's moving with the whole thing, and it will be very obvious if I come back to the plane and I'll change it from object to effector. You can see now it has changed. It's respecting the position of the effector. But if I change it to object, now it's moving it because I move the object. So that's what basically the space and the transform mode, how it basically works. So you can do other stuff as remap and all that, but for now I'll set it back to the default and make sure my clone is also moved back as well. And let me go back to the plane, make sure it's set to relative, and I'll move this one, bring everything back to default. Now the next tab we have here is the color in here, and now the color mode is set to the field mode. So basically if we select the field, which is the linear field, and you can see we have color remap, and the color is set to this pinkish thing. You can change it to any color we want here, and now that will be the color. So it's transforming from the clone's color of the clone to the color of the field. So where the field affects, it changes the color to the field's color. You can still change it from the field's color to effector's color, which is white, so we don't see what's going on. So but if I should come into select my clone and change my clone color to say probably red. Actually, where do I do that? It's actually come to the transform tab. You can see in the transform tab that we have the display mode. You can change it to color, and now you can see the clone color is white here. We can change it to say red, right, or any other color we want, and now you can see the clone color is red. So if the effector's color default is white, so now where the effectors affect, now you can see it sending it from red to white. And you can also set our own custom color. So if we don't like it, we can send it to say green in here, or any color we want in here. So basically that's how the color mode also works, and you can go ahead and use the blend modes in here to add it, subtract it, and multiply and all that in here. So that's basically how the color also modes basically works. Down here you can also use the alpha strength. So just using the black and white matte, you can use alpha strength as well, which I most of the time will not necessarily need it. The next is you can see we have the weight transform, and this particularly works typically using the old versions of Cinema 4D. was very useful, but now with the use of fields, these are not as much useful as it is. But like to explain, so for instance, using the plane field here, plane effector here, I probably at first initially you probably might want to add something like a randomness to it. So I come here and add say random to it, right? And you want the randomness to affect only the place where the field is affecting. You don't want it to affect the whole thing. So typically you come to the effector, the clone, and go to the effector tab, and now actually make sure the plane is selected, and you say weight, you increase the weight in here, weight transform, and I come to my randomness, and where the field is, probably set it to I think none. Like this, I typically use this using the old versions of Cinema 4D, but in here it's not really necessary. So typically you probably will set it to none in here, which I've not actually used it in here for some time, so I don't even know how it applies in here. But basically, when you actually select the clone and you come to the transforms, and you can see we have weight in here. So every clone has its own weight, so we can use the randomness to affect the weight of the clones and now transform it to the linear. But in this scenario, you might not necessarily even need it, because with the plane effector, you can actually come in here and add the how do you call it, the randomness yourself. So for instance, within the fields of the plane, you have random as well, so you can actually come to the fields and say random, and you make it apply to it, or make it overlay, and you can add your random. Or if you want to use a different random effector as well, you can simply select this, right, the clone, and come to Mograph, use like the random effector as well. But because you want it to happen within the space of the this linear, you can actually use the same thing, the same linear field, and drag into the random space. And so basically there's a way working around it, but it's in versions like R19 and downwards, you might have to use the weight transform mode. So let me get back to my parameters. So the weight transform mode basically works alongside with other effectors when you didn't have the fields, to be able to use two effectors or more together using one fall off, basically. So that's how it works. With the UV transform, it's not texture related, but it's more of it works with effectors, the UV position of every node, right? The next is we have the clone modifiers, which in my clone object tutorial I explained it a bit, but I can also go ahead and explain it here. That's why I basically have the platonic and cube different objects in here. So if I should basically change it from with the clone plane selected, if I should increase the modify, you can see now it's sort of sorting it. So where the cube is and it's set to 100%, right? So where the fields, the linear field is 100%, you can see the last cube, the last field show, and where it's very light, meaning the first one, which is the platonic, shows, and in between the 50s and stuff, you can see it's the sphere. I'll actually come to the plane and also the effector, and I'll change the color, and I'll set it off, right? And maybe even with the clone, I'll set it back to the white so that it will be a bit okay, cleaner here. Yeah, so you can see in here, let me actually take off the transform in here. So you can see in here we have platonics, and in the middle we have the spheres, and at the end we have the cube. So if it's more than 75%, the cubes will show, and it's more than 50% to 75, within 50 to 75 it shows here, and less than 50 are the platonic. So that's basically how the modified clones work. It works along with clonal object. And the next is time offset. This deals with animation. Probably I'll have to explain using a different scene, but let me actually, the visibility tool, you can actually simply affect the visibility of objects. So where it affects it, it hides the object and it can show the object. Now with the time offset in here, let me actually start. So I'll uncheck the visibility, then I actually have an animated cube here, so I'll copy it, copy it, and I'll come to this tab, and I'll actually come and paste it here, right? And I'll delete all these ones, I don't need it for now. So if I hit play, you can see it's just a normal cube rotating, in here. So I'll make it a child of the clone, And now if we hit play, one thing we notice is that it's not rotating. But let me actually come into the clonal object, and in the transform I'll just change it to none so that you see only the cube. So if we hit play, you can see the animation is not happening, and that's because in the clonal object you have to make sure it's either we put this cube in a null object for the clonal, or we can in the clonal object I can come to the reset code and make sure it's unchecked, because our cube is in the same position we want our clone to be. It's fine. So if I hit play now, you can see it's playing, but I think we have a lot of clones in here, so it's quite slow. Let me actually reduce it to say, and I'll do it per step, so that I'll do it like say 10 by 10 in here, right? And now if I hit play, you can see what's happening, just our cubes rotating, right? So all I'll have to do is now with the time offset here, it means we can offset the time we want the animation to play. So if I hit play, it starts right because the animation starts right from frame 0, but in the plane you can offset it to say frame 25, so it will never play till we get to frame 25. Now it plays. Now let me actually first take off the field here, and I can see everything plays from frame 25. Now we can use the field to start influencing it. So I'll delete this field and I'll create a new one. So with the plane select, I come to the field and I'll create a new linear field, and you can see if we move it in the middle here, make play, you can see now the field where it's not, where it's affecting it less, it starts right, and now where it's affecting it to the max, it starts later, right? So that's basically what it does. You can also even use like say randomness, so I can actually come in here and add a bit of randomness to it, where is a random field, and maybe even hide this one, and I can see randomize our animation, right? So basically that's what the time offset also does in the cloner in the plane effector. So I'll set all these ones back the default. So the next tab is the deformer tab, which basically now makes the plane effector act like a deformer. So I'll hide this clone and I'll put in the normal object. For now, I'll delete these ones. I'll create a normal sphere in here, and I'll make the plane the charges like using a normal deformer, so the effectors too can be deformers as well. So I'll make it a child of, in fact I want a cube, a sphere, so I'll create a sphere and I'll make it a child of the sphere, and maybe increase the segment of the sphere a bit so we have enough segments. And now let me change the display to garage shading. So if we come to our with the plane effector selected, now you can see in the deformer tab we have objects. So if I say enable the object deformation and come to my plane effector, come to my transformation, I can actually, the position, you can see now it's moving the sphere as one object up, the position and everything. So it's deforming the sphere as one object as you'd expect. Even rotation can do the same thing and all that, right? But also you can make it deform every point of this of the sphere. So if I should set it to point and come back to in here, you can see it's moving the points, but it's moving all upward, so you don't see the effect properly. So I'll actually change it. Instead of Y, I'll say to the Z, and I can see it's scaling. It's like scaling the sphere, and that's because it's moving it according to the normals of the sphere. So if I should come in here and probably add a random field to it, you can see now it's deforming like some deformer, displays deformer with some noise in there. So basically the effectors can act as deformers as well. You can also change it to polygons and it will be affecting every polygon as well. So that's basically what the deformer tab also does. The next tab is the field, which I've actually explained through this process. Like I've been adding fields and stuff. So in here you can define the portions using different fields or follows to where you want the plane effector to affect. So you can use, so we have several of them, a lot of them, and you can use them several combinations, you know. So we can use, let's say, linear to it, and now it's affecting. Actually, let's go back to our clone so that you see what you are doing. Bring back our clones. Where is it? Yeah, let me actually delete the sphere because we don't need it. And now maybe even with the, I'll take off the animation of this one. You don't necessarily need this one, the animation. So with our clones, I'll increase it 20 by 20. So yeah, if I go back to my plane effector, and in here now I can add any field I want. So you see, it's my plane is moving it upwards. Plane effector, I want it to move it upwards, not on the, so my plane is moving the clones upwards. So with the fields we can limit it to a certain point. So there are several fields that we can use. You can use the linear field, which, you know, works linearly. We can go ahead and add other fields. So we can add the random field, and now that's randomized it. Now it's blending with the linear field because it's set to max. So if I should set it to normal, you can see it's only the random field that's working, and it works like the Photoshop blend mode. So I can set it to overlay, and it will look for the gray areas and, you know, apply the randomness to it. So overlay, and now if I should move my linear field, here you can see it's only the places that the linear the gray areas within the linear field that have been affected. You can set it to subtract and all that. You can also go ahead and still add more. So I can come in again and add let's say a box field, and that will give you like a box in here. You can see it's affecting anything that falls within the box is being affected, and that one too I can probably set it to overlay. So it will affect only the things that falls within the gray area of the linear field, because linear field is the first one down here. And now you can actually, if I move the linear field, that's where only the box and the random will apply and stuff like that. So that's basically about the field. And with the plane effector, I have actually a video that also teaches how you can use it to do other exciting things. In my subsequent videos, I'll do a bit more videos to explain what you can do with the plane effector, and I explain what each and every effector does on its own. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, please kindly subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.